Commander Vextok adjusted his ceremonial research goggles and gazed down at the specimen with the kind of smug satisfaction that only comes from having 6 advanced degrees and absolutely zero common sense. The human sat in the containment cell, methodically eating what appeared to be a sandwich made from ration paste and optimism. "Behold, colleagues," Vextok announced to his team of equally overconfident xenobiologists, "the perfect test subject for our apex predator behavioral study. Homo sapiens. Designation, Jake Morrison. Occupation," he consulted his datapad with theatrical flair, "sanitation engineer." Dr. Kruxel, whose purple tentacles were currently vibrating with excitement, peered through the observation window. "A janitor. Commander, are you certain this creature will provide adequate stimulation for the Kepler 442b predators? It appears remarkably unremarkable." Jake looked up from his sandwich and waved cheerfully at the aliens staring at him. Several of them jumped backward. "That is precisely the point," Vextok declared, puffing out his chest cavity. "According to our extensive research, humans are soft, slow, and possess no natural weapons whatsoever. They have somehow convinced themselves they are intelligent despite having only one brain and no redundant organ systems. Observe how it consumes processed nutrients without even checking for toxins first." Research Assistant Blimnox raised a manipulator appendage. "Sir, our databases indicate humans have survived on their homeworld for several millennia. Surely that suggests some level of—" "Survived?" Vextok's laugh sounded like a garbage disposal having an existential crisis. "My dear Blimnox, they survived by hiding in caves and hitting things with sticks. Their planet barely qualified as a Class 2 danger zone. Meanwhile, Kepler 442b boasts 17 different species of apex predators, gravitational anomalies that can crush bones, and atmospheric conditions that would dissolve most organic compounds." The team gathered around the holographic display showing their chosen testing ground. Kepler 442b rotated slowly, its surface a patchwork of hostile ecosystems that had been specifically selected for maximum lethality. "The Shadow Maws alone have a 97% kill rate," Dr. Krixel noted, her tentacles now doing what could charitably be called a happy dance. "And the Thornback Crushes haven't lost a territorial dispute in recorded history." "Exactly," Vextok beamed, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "We will observe how apex predators react to prey that poses absolutely no threat whatsoever. It is the perfect control group for our aggression studies." Technician Zorping looked up from his console. "Should we perhaps start with a smaller test? Maybe a nice herbivore first?" Vextok waved dismissively. "Nonsense. Science demands bold action. Besides, I have already placed a substantial wager with the Rigelian Research Collective that our human will survive less than 4 hours. The betting pool is currently at 15,000 credits." In the containment cell, Jake finished his sandwich and began doing what appeared to be stretching exercises. The aliens watched in fascination as he touched his toes, completely unaware that they were observing a creature whose ancestors had persistence-hunted mammoth into extinction and then decided that was too easy. So they invented extreme sports. "Initiating transport sequence," announced the ship's AI with the enthusiasm of someone who had long since given up trying to talk sense into organic life forms. "Depositing subject on planetary surface in 3, 2, 1. The transport beam engaged, and Jake Morrison vanished in a shower of sparkling light, taking with him a standard survival kit, a cheerful attitude, and approximately 4 billion years of evolutionary advantages that the research team had somehow overlooked in their enthusiasm to play God with the food chain. Commander Vextok rubbed his manipulator appendages together gleefully. "Gentlemen, ladies, and assorted non-binary colleagues, let us begin the most educational 4 hours of our careers." If he had been capable of irony, the universe might have warned him that he was about to receive a very different kind of education than the one he was expecting. Commander Vextok settled into his observation chair with a steaming cup of Klaxi juice and the supreme confidence of someone who had never met a human having what they generously call a good day. The tracking display showed Jake's biosignature as a cheerful blue dot in the middle of what the research team had lovingly nicknamed the meat grinder, a particularly hostile section of Kepler 442b. Where even the plants had developed trust issues. "Readings show the subject has landed safely," reported Technician Zorping, though his definition of safely was doing some heavy lifting considering Jake had materialized directly between a shadow maw nesting ground and a pack of territorial razor-claw stalkers. "Excellent," Vextok purred, adjusting the display to maximum resolution. Now we simply wait for nature to take its course. I give it 20 minutes before something eats him. Dr. Kusel's tentacles were practically vibrating with scientific excitement. The shadow moths should detect his scent within moments. Their olfactory sensors can identify prey from 3 kilometers away. What happened next would later be described in Vextok's resignation letter as a fundamental breakdown in everything we thought we knew about predator-prey dynamics. Instead of cowering, hiding, or doing any of the sensible things prey animals typically do when dropped into a death world, Jake Morrison did something unprecedented. He stood up, brushed the dust off his standard-issue jumpsuit, looked around at the landscape of horrors surrounding him, and grinned. "Fascinating," he said aloud, apparently addressing the universe in general. "It's like Australia and Jurassic Park had a baby, and that baby was raised by very angry dinosaurs." The research team exchanged confused glances. "Did he just compliment the hostile environment?" whispered research assistant Blimnox. Things got significantly more confusing when Jake's tracker started moving. Not in the frantic, zigzagging pattern of terrified prey fleeing for its life, but in slow, deliberate circles. The blue dot on their screen moved methodically through the terrain, pausing occasionally before continuing in what appeared to be an organized search pattern. "What is he doing?" Vextok demanded, his confidence beginning to develop hairline cracks. Zorpin squinted at his readings. "According to the biosignature analysis, sir, he appears to be tracking something." "Tracking what? He is supposed to be the one being tracked." Their answer came when Jake's voice crackled through the communication array, casual as someone commenting on the weather. "Hey, orbital observers. I'm assuming someone's watching this circus. You might want to take notes. I've got fresh shadow maw prints here, probably a mating pair based on the size differential, and they've been marking territory recently. Judging by the claw marks on these trees, they're bigger than your average earth lion, but the stride pattern suggests they're ambush predators, not pursuit hunters." The alien research team sat in stunned silence as their helpless prey proceeded to deliver what sounded suspiciously like a nature documentary narration. "The interesting thing about apex predators," Jake continued cheerfully, apparently having a lovely conversation with himself, "is that they're usually apex because they've specialized for their environment. But specialization creates predictable behavior patterns, and predictable behavior means you can work with it instead of against it." Dr. Crixell's tentacles had stopped vibrating entirely. "Work with it? What does that mean, work with it?" Their question was answered when Jake's tracker stopped moving entirely. For several minutes, the blue dot remained stationary while the research team held their collective breath. Then, gradually, other biosignatures began appearing on their sensors. Large ones, approaching from multiple directions. "Shadow Moors," breathed Zorping. 3. No, 4 of them. They have him surrounded." Vextok leaned forward, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Finally. Though I must admit, he lasted longer than expected. 27 minutes is actually quite impressive for a soft-bodied bipedal." "Sir," Zorping interrupted, his voice climbing several octaves, "the shadow moths aren't attacking." "What do you mean they are not attacking? That is literally their only function." "Abby could be sitting, sir, in a circle around the human, and according to these bio readings, their stress levels are actually decreasing." Through the audio feed, they could hear Jake's voice, now taking on the patient tone of someone explaining basic concepts to particularly slow students. "That's right, big guys. See? No sudden movements, no direct eye contact, just calm, steady energy. You're not sure what I am, but I'm not acting like prey, so your programming is a little confused right now, isn't it?" Commander Vextok stared at the display, as if it had personally insulted his mother. His carefully calculated experiment was rapidly transforming into something that made absolutely no sense, according to every xenobiology textbook ever written. "Gentlemen," he said slowly, "I believe we may have underestimated our test subject." In the distance, they could hear Jake chuckling. "Now this is going to be fun." Day 2 of what Commander Vextok had optimistically labeled Operation Easy Lunch began with the kind of morning briefing that makes seasoned researchers question their career choices and contemplate the simple life of an asteroid farmer. "Status report," Vextok demanded, though his voice had acquired the hollow quality of someone whose worldview had been systematically dismantled by a janitor with a positive attitude. Technician Zorping consulted his readings with the expression of someone delivering news about a plague outbreak. "Sir, the human has... well, he appears to have built a shelter. A comfortable one, with furniture." "Furniture?" "Carved from ironbark trees, sir. The same trees whose sap is toxic to most known life forms. He's wearing gloves made from shadow maw hide." Dr. Krexel's tentacles had developed a nervous twitch that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Where exactly did he acquire Shadow Ma Hai Jolping? That's the interesting part, Doctor. According to our overnight surveillance, the Shadow Maws appear to have voluntarily shed their outer skin layers. They've been bringing the malted hide to the human as some sort of offering. The observation deck fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant sound of Commander Vextalk's carefully constructed reality crumbling into dust. On the main display, Jake Morrison sat comfortably outside his improvised shelter, apparently having a casual breakfast while surrounded by 4 of Kepler 4 and 42b's most feared apex predators, the Shadow Maws, creatures whose very name had struck terror into the hearts of big game hunters across 3 star systems, were arranged around him like oversized, carnivorous house cats. "Audio feed, please," Vextalk whispered. Jake's voice filled the observation deck, cheerful and conversational. "Morning, everyone. Hope you've slept well. Today's agenda includes advanced pack hunting techniques and what I like to call cooperative resource management. But first, breakfast." He reached into his supply pack and produced what appeared to be standard ration bars, which he proceeded to break into pieces and distribute to his audience. The Shadow Maws accepted the offerings with the kind of delicate care typically reserved for handling explosive devices. "Now, I know what you're thinking," Jake continued, addressing the Shadow Maws as if they were attending a wilderness survival seminar. "These taste like cardboard and disappointment, but they're high in protein and contain all the essential nutrients you need for optimal performance. Think of them as performance-enhancing supplements." Research Assistant Blimnox raised a trembling manipulator appendage. "Sir, are we absolutely certain that Shadow Maws are obligate carnivores? Because they appear to be, enjoying the ration bars." "Of course they are obligate carnivores," Vextalk snapped. "Their digestive systems cannot process plant matter. It is biologically impossible." On screen, one of the Shadow Maws made a sound that could only be described as a pleased rumble and gently nudged Jake's shoulder with its massive head. "Good girl, Duchess," Jake said, scratching behind what passed for the creature's ears. "I can tell you're the pack leader. You've got that confident energy, very alpha female vibe." Dr. Quixel's scientific composure finally cracked. "He named them. He named the apex predators, and they are responding to their names." Indeed, as Jake called out Duke, Bear, and Lady Whiskers, 3 other Shadow Maws perked up and moved closer, their tails, previously thought to be used exclusively for delivering lethal strikes, wagging in what could only be interpreted as excitement. "This is impossible," Vextalk muttered. "Shadow Maws are solitary hunters. They do not form social bonds. They certainly do not wag their tails like domestic pets." "Sir," Zorping interrupted, his voice climbing toward panic territory. "We're detecting additional biosignatures approaching the human's location. Large ones, really large ones." The display updated to show new contacts converging on Jake's position. Even the research team's advanced sensors seemed to hesitate before identifying the newcomers. "Thornback crushers," Dr. Krixel whispered. "A mated pair by the size of them." "Sir, thornback crushers have never coexisted with Shadow Maws in recorded history. They are territorial enemies." On the audio feed, they could hear Jake's delighted laughter. "Oh, excellent. New friends. Duke, Duchess, I need you guys to stay calm here. We're about to have some visitors, and first impressions matter." What followed challenged every known principle of xenobiology, predator behavior, and basic common sense. Instead of the expected territorial battle that should have reduced several acres of landscape to smoking rubble, Jake Morrison somehow orchestrated what could only be described as the galaxy's most dangerous dinner party. "Okay, everyone, this is Crusher and Mrs. Crusher," Jake announced, as if introducing co-workers at a company picnic. "They're a little nervous because they're not used to sharing space, but we're all going to get along just fine. Mrs. Crusher, I can see you eyeing Lady Whiskers there, but she's actually really sweet once you get to know her." The Thornback Crushers, creatures capable of reducing armored vehicles to scrap metal, settled down beside the Shadow Maws with the cautious politeness of guests at an awkward family reunion. "Gentlemen," Commander Vextalk said slowly, watching his career prospects evaporate in real time, "I believe we may need to reconsider our threat assessment protocols." On the display, Jake was already pulling out what appeared to be a notebook, sketching diagrams and making notes with the systematic thoroughness of someone conducting field research. "Day 2. Preliminary observations," he dictated. "Local apex predators demonstrate remarkable adaptability when approached with appropriate social protocols. Hypothesis: Previous human contact may have emphasized dominance-based interactions rather than cooperative behavioral modeling. Further testing required. The research team exchanged horrified glances as the full implications of Jake's casual commentary sank in. He wasn't just surviving their death world. He was conducting his own research project, and based on the growing collection of apex predators gathering around his campsite like students attending office hours, his methodology was significantly more effective than theirs. "Sir," whispered Blimnox, "what exactly did we unleash down there?" Commander Vextalk stared at the display, watching a human janitor revolutionize everything they thought they knew about predator behavior, and realized he had no idea how to answer that question. Day 3 of what the research team had begun referring to as the incident dawned with the kind of existential dread typically reserved for discovering your taxes are being audited by interdimensional beings. Commander Vextalk hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and was beginning to develop the hollow-eyed stare of someone watching their understanding of the universe get systematically deconstructed by a maintenance worker with a smile. "Morning report," he croaked, though calling it morning was generous considering he'd been staring at the display screens for 37 consecutive hours. Technician Zorping approached with the careful steps of someone delivering news about an incoming asteroid. "Sir, overnight developments have been extensive. The human's compound now covers approximately 3 square kilometers and houses 17 different apex predator species." 17? Dr. Creeksil's tentacles had given up their nervous twitching and gone straight to what could only be described as hysterical flailing. "There are only 19 known apex predator species on the entire planet." "Yes, ma'am. He's apparently sent scouting parties to locate the remaining 2. On the main display, what had once been Jake's modest campsite now resembled something between a wildlife preserve and a military training facility. Shadow Maws patrolled the perimeter in organized formations, while Thornback Crushers had somehow been convinced to serve as living earth-moving equipment, reshaping the landscape according to Jake's specifications. "Audio feed," Vextalk whispered, though his voice carried the tone of someone requesting their own execution. Jake's cheerful commentary filled the observation deck. "Morning, orbital voyeurs. Hope you're taking good notes up there, because today's curriculum includes advanced tactical cooperation and what I like to call interspecies management dynamics. We're going to revolutionize how apex predators think about cooperation." In the center of the compound, Jake had constructed what appeared to be an amphitheater from carved stone, with himself positioned at the center like a professor addressing a very unusual graduate seminar. His audience consisted of creatures that had individually been responsible for the evacuation of 3 separate research colonies. "Now, I know what you're all thinking," Jake continued, addressing a razor-claw stalker that was taking what appeared to be notes by scratching symbols into the ground with its talons. "Traditional hunting has always been about individual success, territorial dominance, and zero-sum competition. But what if I told you there was a better way?" Research Assistant Blimnox made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a dying mechanical device. "Sir, is he teaching them economic theory?" Jake pulled out a crude chart he'd apparently drawn on treated hide. "See, the problem with conventional apex predator behavior is inefficiency. You spend enormous amounts of energy defending territory, fighting over resources, and maintaining dominance hierarchies. But cooperative hunting, shared resource management, that's how you optimize your energy expenditure while maximizing caloric intake." The assembled predators listened with the rapt attention of students discovering their professor was about to reveal the answers to next week's exam. Several were taking notes. "But sir," interrupted a massive Thornback Crusher in what sounded suspiciously like English, "what about traditional territorial boundaries?" The research team's collective silence was broken only by the sound of Dr. Curixel fainting and hitting the deck with a wet thump. "Excellent question, Big Mike," Jake replied, apparently having named the creature during their previous conversations. "Traditional boundaries assume scarcity thinking, but when you coordinate hunting patterns and share intelligence about prey movements, everyone's success rate increases exponentially. It's basic game theory." Commander Vextalk's left eye had developed a pronounced twitch. "Zorping," he said slowly, "please confirm that the Thornback Crusher just spoke Galactic Standard." "Yes, sir. According to our linguistic analysis, the human has been conducting language lessons for the past 18 hours. Current vocabulary appears to include basic tactical terminology, mathematical concepts, and what our translation matrix identifies as motivational buzzwords." On screen, Jake was now using a stick to draw diagrams in the dirt, while his audience of apex predators nodded along with the engaged enthusiasm of management consultants discovering a new paradigm. Now, the key to effective pack coordination, Jake explained, is understanding each species' natural strengths and designing complementary roles. Shadow Maws excel at stealth and reconnaissance. Thornbach Crushers are your heavy assault specialists. Razorclaw Stalkers are perfect for rapid flanking maneuvers. A Shadow Maw raised what passed for a paw. But Jake, what about prey that utilizes vertical escape routes? Great question, Duchess. That's where our aerial partners come in. Jake gestured toward a section of the compound where several flying Deathhawks, creatures previously thought to be untrainable due to their aggressive independence, were perched in organized formations. Air support changes everything. Vextalk felt something inside his brain snap. He has air support. The human janitor has organized aerial reconnaissance. Sir, Zorping's voice had climbed into frequencies typically reserved for emergency broadcasts. Long-range sensors are detecting coordinated predator movements across 17 different sectors. They appear to be implementing the humans' tactical suggestions on a planet-wide scale. The implications hit the research team like a cargo hauler filled with existential crisis. Jake hadn't just tamed a few local predators. He'd fundamentally restructured the entire planetary ecosystem's approach to resource management and territorial behavior. Emergency protocol meeting, Vextalk announced, though his voice carried all the authority of someone requesting permission to hide under a blanket. All department heads, conference room, now. As the team filed out, they could hear Jake's voice continuing his impromptu seminar. Tomorrow, we're going to cover advanced logistics and supply chain management. I've been thinking about seasonal migration patterns and how we can optimize prey herd management for sustainable harvesting. One of the Razorclaw stalkers, apparently named Professor Claus based on Jake's casual reference, raised a talon. Will there be a written examination? Absolutely, Professor. Can't have proper education without assessment protocols. In the conference room, Commander Vextalk faced his team with the expression of someone whose life's work had just been converted into a cautionary tale about the dangers of assumptions. Colleagues, he began, I believe we have created what military strategists would classify as a cascading tactical nightmare. Dr. Curixil, recently revived and sporting a significant bruise on her cranial dome, spoke first. Sir, we need to consider the broader implications. If the human can reorganize apex predator behavior this efficiently, what happens when word spreads to other systems? Other systems, Vextalk's remaining composure cracked entirely. You think he's going to export this methodology? Their answer came through the communication array as Jake's voice, now addressing what sounded like a much larger audience. Okay, everyone. I've had some requests from neighboring sectors about consulting opportunities. I'm thinking we start a franchise model. Basic predator optimization packages, advanced tactical seminars, maybe some certification programs for pack leadership roles. The conference room fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant sound of everything they thought they knew about xenobiology being systematically dismantled by a human with a clipboard and an enthusiasm for process improvement. Gentlemen, ladies, and assorted colleagues, Vextalk said finally, I believe we may need to update our threat assessment of humanity from harmless to galactic restructuring event. Outside, they could hear the coordinated roars of 17 apex predator species practicing what sounded suspiciously like team-building exercises. The betting pool on Jake's survival time had been quietly discontinued after reaching negative numbers. By the afternoon of Day 3, the situation on Kepler 442b had evolved beyond unprecedented scientific disaster and entered territory that would require entirely new classifications in the Galactic Research Ethics Manual. Commander Vextalk sat in his command chair, surrounded by emergency protocols he'd never imagined needing, watching his career dissolve into a cautionary tale about the dangers of overconfidence. The crisis began when technician Zorping detected something that should have been impossible, according to every biological principle in their databases. The planet's apex predators were exhibiting signs of acute psychological stress. Sir, Zorping reported, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose understanding of reality had been professionally violated. We're receiving distress signals from the wildlife. Distress signals? Vextalk's laugh had developed a slightly hysterical edge. What do you mean, distress signals? They are apex predators, not refugee civilians. That's just it, sir. According to our bioscanners, the Shadow Maws in Sector 7 are displaying elevated cortisol levels, irregular sleep patterns, and what our behavioral analysis algorithms classify as performance anxiety. The Thornback Crushers in sectors 12 through 15 appear to be experiencing what can only be described as imposter syndrome. Dr. Kriexel, whose tentacles had given up pretending to be under her conscious control, leaned over the sensor displays with the desperate focus of someone hoping the data would start making sense if she stared at it hard enough. These readings indicate chronic stress responses across multiple species. But that's impossible. These creatures are biologically engineered for dominance. Ma'am, interrupted Research Assistant Blimnox, we're also detecting what appears to be organized protest behavior. The Razorclaw stalkers in Sector 4 have formed what they're calling a union and are demanding better working conditions. The observation deck fell silent except for the increasingly frantic beeping of their monitoring equipment, which seemed to be having its own existential crisis about the data it was being asked to process. Audio intercept from the Razorclaw delegation, announced the ship's AI with the weary resignation of a consciousness that had long since given up trying to make sense of organic life forms. The speakers crackled to life, broadcasting what sounded like a formal grievance hearing conducted in broken galactic standard. We, the United Razorclaw Collective of Sector 4, formally request immediate reassignment to less stressful hunting territories. Current management expectations have created unreasonable performance pressures that compromise our traditional lifestyle values. Commander Vextalk blinked slowly, processing the fact that he was listening to apex predators filing a workplace complaint. Did they just unionize? Sir, Zorp's voice had climbed into frequencies typically reserved for announcing incoming apocalypses. It gets worse. We're intercepting communications between different predator groups. They're sharing information about what they call the human situation and coordinating avoidance strategies. The main display updated with a tactical overview that looked less like an ecosystem and more like a military retreat. Red dots representing various apex predator species were systematically withdrawing from Jake's expanding zone of influence, leaving behind what appeared to be formal evacuation notices. Play the intercepts, Vextalk ordered, though his tone suggested he was bracing for impact. A series of increasingly desperate communications filled the observation deck. This is Pack Leader Snarl to all Shadowmaw units. Avoid grid reference 77 Alpha at all costs. The human has introduced something called performance metrics and expects us to file daily hunting reports. I haven't slept in 36 hours. Flying Deathhawk Squadron reporting massive morale problems. The human wants us to coordinate our attack patterns using something called synchronized flight formations. Half my squadron has developed motion sickness from practicing aerial choreography. Thornback Crusher Alpha to command. Request immediate evacuation. The human has implemented a peer review system for territorial disputes. We're supposed to provide constructive feedback about each other's crushing techniques. It's affecting our confidence. Dr. Kukrek's tentacles had arranged themselves into what appeared to be a stress pattern, resembling ancient prayer symbols. They are having performance reviews. The apex predators are having performance reviews. Sir, Blimnox added helpfully, preliminary psychological profiles suggest widespread burnout, anxiety disorders, and what appears to be species-wide existential questioning. Several Shadowmaw packs have requested transfer to less demanding ecosystems, where they can focus on traditional hunting values without artificial optimization pressure. The situation deteriorated further when their sensors detected what could only be described as an organized exodus. Apex predators from across 3 continents were abandoning their territories and migrating toward the planetary spaceports, facilities that had been abandoned for decades due to the hostile wildlife. They're leaving, Zorpe announced, unnecessarily, watching the display as dozens of dangerous species streamed away from their natural habitats. The entire planetary ecosystem is relocating to avoid one human. Audio from the spaceport facilities, the AI announced, apparently having given up any pretense that this situation made sense. The speakers filled with the sounds of what appeared to be the galaxy's most dangerous customer service line. Emergency evacuation services, this is Coordinator Blix. Yes, we understand this is unusual, but we're prepared to process departure requests from indigenous wildlife. Please state your species classification and reason for evacuation. This is Shadowmaw Pack Delta 7. We're requesting immediate transport to literally anywhere else, preferably somewhere with simple hunting requirements and no productivity seminars. Understood. We have openings on Kepler 186F. Fair warning, it's a Class 3 death world, with acid rain and sentient volcanic activity. Perfect. When's the next transport? Commander Vextalk watched the exodus with the numb fascination of someone witnessing the collapse of everything he thought he understood about predator behavior. They prefer acid rain and sentient volcanoes to dealing with Jake Morrison. Sir, Dr. Kingsell observed, we may need to consider that our test subject has fundamentally altered the competitive dynamics of an entire planetary ecosystem through what appears to be advanced management consulting. The situation reached its nadir when they intercepted a formal petition addressed directly to their research vessel. To the orbital observers, we, the United Species Coalition of Kepler 421b, formally request immediate intervention in what has become an untenable working environment. The human-designated Jake Morrison has introduced systematic changes to our traditional hunting practices that, while potentially more efficient, have created unsustainable stress levels across all participating species. We demand either his immediate removal or our own evacuation to more manageable ecosystems. Signed, pretty much everyone who used to live here. The petition included detailed testimonials from individual predators describing their experiences with Jake's optimization programs. Before the human arrived, hunting was simple. See prey, chase prey, eat prey. Now there are flowcharts. I don't know what a flowchart is, but apparently I need 17 of them to properly document a successful hunt. Anonymous. Razorclaw Stalker. He keeps talking about synergistic approaches to resource acquisition and leveraging our core competencies. I just want to crush things and take naps. Is that too much to ask? Thornback Crusher designation Big Mike. The worst part is that his methods actually work. We're more successful than ever, but success feels meaningless when it comes with quarterly reviews and team-building exercises. Shadowmaw Pack Leader Duchess. Commander Vextalk stared at the testimonials, realizing that Jake Morrison had achieved something no military force in galactic history had managed. He'd made the apex predators of a death world want to quit their jobs. Gentlemen, he announced to his increasingly shell-shocked team, I believe we have discovered something far more terrifying than any apex predator. What's that, sir? Whispered Blimnox. Human Resources Management. The observation deck fell silent as the full implications of their discovery settled over them like a shroud of bureaucratic horror. Outside, the last transport filled with relocating apex predators lifted off, leaving behind an ecosystem that had been systematically optimized into an existential crisis by a janitor with a positive attitude and a background in workplace efficiency. The emergency evacuation request came through official channels at 13:47 hours Galactic Standard Time, delivered with the kind of bureaucratic formality that suggested someone was desperately trying to maintain professional dignity while their world collapsed around them. Research Vessel Inquisitive Probe. This is Jake Morrison, requesting pickup at your earliest convenience, the transmission began, Jake's voice carrying the cheerful tone of someone wrapping up a successful business trip. I've completed my preliminary assessment of the local ecosystem and collected some fascinating data on predator behavioral modification. Also, I may have accidentally revolutionized the entire planetary food chain, but I'm sure that's nothing a few follow-up studies can't sort out. Commander Vextalk stared at the communication console with the hollow expression of someone whose career had been systematically dismantled by a maintenance worker with a clipboard. Around him, his research team displayed various stages of psychological processing, ranging from Dr. Curick's nervous tentacle wringing to Zorping's 1,000-yard stare at the sensor display. Sir, whispered Research Assistant Blimnox, should we beam him up? What choice do we have? Vextalk replied, his voice carrying the weary resignation of someone who had learned that the universe had a deeply troubling sense of humor. Initiate transport sequence. The familiar sparkle of the transport beam materialized Jake Morrison in the center of their cargo bay, apparently none the worse for his 3-day sojourn on what was supposed to be the most dangerous planet in their sector. He stood casually, brushing dust off his jumpsuit, surrounded by what appeared to be an extensive collection of field notes, sketches, and handmade charts that documented his systematic restructuring of an entire ecosystem. Hey there, folks, Jake called out cheerfully, as the research team gathered around him with the cautious approach of scientists observing a potentially explosive phenomenon. Great little planet you picked for the experiment. Really challenging ecosystem, lots of potential for optimization. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of implementing a few process improvements. Dr. Cusick's tentacles had developed what appeared to be a permanent nervous twitch. Process improvements, she managed? Oh, absolutely. See, the problem with the existing predator hierarchy was inefficient resource allocation and redundant territorial conflicts. Classic organizational dysfunction. But with some basic cooperation protocols and streamlined communication systems, we managed to increase overall hunting success rates by approximately 300%, while reducing energy expenditure by 47%. Jake pulled out a hand-drawn chart that looked like something between a business presentation and a military strategic overview. Here's the interesting part. Once you eliminate artificial scarcity thinking and implement collaborative resource management, apex predators actually prefer cooperative hunting models. It's just that nobody had ever bothered to explain the benefits properly. Technician Zorping found his voice, though it emerged as something resembling a mechanical whimper. The predators, they all evacuated the planet. Well, yeah, Jake shrugged. Change management is always stressful, especially when you're dealing with embedded behavioral patterns that go back millions of years. Some individuals are naturally more adaptable than others. The ones who stayed really embraced the new paradigm. But I understand why some of the more traditional hunters preferred to relocate rather than adjust their methods. Commander Vextalk stepped forward, his movements carrying the careful precision of someone trying not to trigger a diplomatic incident. Mr. Morrison, do you realize what you've done? Conducted the most comprehensive predator behavioral study in recorded galactic history, Jake replied helpfully. Developed a replicable methodology for ecosystem optimization, proved that apex predators respond positively to structured management approaches when presented with appropriate incentive frameworks. You've created an interstellar refugee crisis involving the most dangerous creatures in known space. Jake paused, apparently considering this perspective for the first time. Huh, that's one way to look at it. I prefer to think of it as expanding career opportunities for underutilized wildlife. Some of those shadow maws were really ready for new challenges. The cargo bay fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the distant sound of several brilliant scientific careers being quietly euthanized by a custodial worker's casual competence. Sir, Blimnox interrupted, his voice climbing toward panic frequencies. We're receiving an incoming transmission. Multiple signatures, large ones. The main display activated to show what appeared to be a delegation of the planet's former apex predators, now apparently serving as Jake's unofficial advisory council. Leading the group was the Shadowmaw pack leader that Jake had nicknamed Duchess, flanked by Big Mike the Thornback Crusher and Professor Claus the Razorclaw Stalker. Jake, Duchess called out in surprisingly fluent galactic standard. We've completed the preliminary assessment of potential expansion territories. The Rigel system shows excellent potential for franchise opportunities, and the Vega colonies have specifically requested consultation on their own predator management challenges. Outstanding, Jake replied, apparently treating this interspecies business meeting as perfectly normal. What about the certification program proposals? Professor Claus stepped forward, somehow managing to look pressatorial despite being a creature designed primarily for efficient killing. We've drafted a comprehensive curriculum for apex predator professional development. Core modules include cooperative hunting strategies, interspecies communication, and advanced territorial management. We're calling it the Morrison method. Commander Vextalk felt something fundamental break inside his understanding of how the universe was supposed to function. They've developed a training program. It gets better, sir, Zorping announced with the tone of someone delivering news about an incoming plague. Long-range sensors are detecting organized predator delegations arriving from 17 different star systems. Apparently, word has spread about the revolutionary advances in ecosystem optimization, and they're requesting consultation. Jake beamed with the satisfaction of someone whose weekend project had unexpectedly turned into a galactic business venture. See, this is what happens when you approach problems with fresh thinking instead of outdated assumptions. You discover opportunities nobody knew existed. Dr. Cusick's tentacles had arranged themselves into what appeared to be a surrender position. We were supposed to be studying you. How did this become you studying us? Well, Jake replied thoughtfully, I think the issue was that you were approaching the experiment from a predator-prey framework, which assumes zero-sum competition and dominance hierarchies. But most complex systems respond better to collaborative problem-solving and mutual benefit optimization. It's basic systems theory. The research team exchanged glances that conveyed the shared realization that they had been intellectually outmaneuvered by someone whose official job description included emptying waste baskets and maintaining restroom supplies. Mr. Morrison, Vextalk said slowly, what exactly did you do before you became a sanitation engineer? Jake's grin widened. Oh, I used to run a little management consulting firm, specialized in organizational development and change management. But the corporate world got boring after a while. Too much politics, not enough genuine problem solving. Figured I'd try something simple and peaceful, like janitorial work. The cargo bay fell silent as the full implications of their colossal miscalculations settled over the research team like a blanket of professional humiliation. They had kidnapped a former management consultant, dropped him on a death world, and then acted surprised when he optimized it. So, Jake continued cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the existential crisis he'd triggered, when can we start the follow-up studies? I've got some ideas about scaling these methodologies to entire star systems, and Duchess here thinks we could probably revolutionize galactic wildlife management within the next 5 years. Commander Vexstock stared at Jake Morrison, former management consultant, current janitor, and apparently the most dangerous human in known space, and realized that their threat assessment update was going to require entirely new classification categories. Gentlemen, he announced to his shell-shocked team, I believe we have discovered something far more terrifying than any apex predator, any death world, or any military force in galactic history. What's that, sir? Whispered Blimnox. Bexhawk gestured toward Jake, who was now enthusiastically discussing franchise opportunities with a delegation of apex predators while sketching expansion plans on the back of his hand. Human resources development. As if to punctuate his point, Jake's voice carried across the cargo bay. Now, who wants to talk about performance incentive programs and team-building retreats? The research team's collective shudder was audible across 3 decks. Outside, 17 different species of apex predators were apparently taking notes. The betting pool on human threat assessment had been quietly updated from harmless to galactic restructuring event to please send help. And somewhere in the depths of space, word was spreading about a human who could turn death worlds into business opportunities and apex predators into middle management. The universe, it seemed, was about to get a lot more organized. Whether it wanted to or not,